So the Montreal Canadiens could potentially make a bunch of different moves, or they could be patient. I think that's kind of the summary of the conversation here with Marco. So Marco, as we're sitting here again, U.S. Thanksgiving, I think that's always a mark that we look at the calendar. You're about a month away
hmm
from the Christmas holidays. Where is your head at for the Atlantic Division? Where do you see certain teams finishing into the top three, wild card? Where does Montreal sit in that? And I know you've been throwing a couple shots at Toronto. So do you think this is the year where Toronto's missing the playoffs? I'm curious on all those things from you here.
Unfortunately, I do think this is the year that Toronto's missing the playoffs. I do apologize. It's just listen,
No.
I appreciate the passion in Toronto. I just feel like not enough was done to A, improve this team, and B, uh, you know, come up with a way to make up for the loss of a very real player in Mitch Marner. I mean, losing an 100-point player is very rare that you bounce back from that seamlessly. And the
Yeah.
Leafs, unfortunately, have not been very lucky this season when it comes to injuries. To their credit, they've played through it, but without the magic of Willie Nee, I don't necessarily know where they would be right now. They'd probably be flirting with, the Nashvilles and the Calgarys. And so I kudos to some of the players like John Tavares taking the deal that he did and still continuing to be a great vet. They got decimated defensively. I find that just the system is just off this year, and obviously the injury to Stolars doesn't help either. And Wool was away from the team, so there's a lack of stability there too. So, I think there's a huge mountain to climb for Toronto. I think it's a huge mountain to climb, and I think that their mountain to climb right now, when you look at the way that the Atlantic Division is set out, I mean, it's going to be a tough climb out. They're 4 points out of a playoff spot with a game extra played at the moment of this recording, but Montreal also just came out of its worst funk of the season as
Yeah.
well, having lost five straight. So the expectation is that Montreal is going to go back up to at least a 650, 666 in terms of winning record. If they get back to at least a 500 between now and the end of December, at that point, it's a little difficult. And what if they run into more injuries? What if something happens to Nyes or whatnot? So
Mm.
that's where I'm kind of a little afraid. Oh, and they have to contend with the Florida Panthers and the Detroit Red Wings. We already mentioned the Canadiens, and then you roll it up. Boston's playing fantastic this year. I think you can easily say that Pasternak is having a heart level season in the way that he's playing for them. The Ottawa Senators, they seem to be finding their mojo as well. Strength down the middle. Shane Pinto having a great season. I think that Jake Sanderson continues to improve, and it's really kind of solidified their back end as well. So they're firing on all cylinders right now, one of the hotter teams in the league. And the Tampa Bay Lightning, I mean, 8-2 in their last 10 games.
Yeah.
You knew it from the start. They were going to start slow, and then those veterans were going to find their way and push. And they're doing it with some key injuries as well. So I felt like once they find that stability, they'll be fine. But I feel like Tampa's also a team that's going to be aggressive on the buyer's market. That's a team I have heard has been wanting to do something um, serious this season on the trade front. So I wouldn't be surprised if between now and the trade deadline they make a play for a big name. And if they continue to play like this, I don't see who stops them in that regard. So that's just the Atlantic in terms of the way I see it shaping up. I think the Canadians are going to be in that wild card chase, wild card two, wild card one spot. Like that's where I see them finishing off. If one of the teams that I just talked about, like the Boston or the Ottawas, have a blip, because they are still very close in points. But if one of them has a
Yep.
blip, like Boston's played 25 games and has 28 points, Montreal has played 22 games and has 27. So Montreal has a better winning percentage than Boston. So in theory, Montreal would be ahead, but those two could flip flop between third in the Atlantic and the first wild card or second wild card spot. But that's where I think the Canadians are going to be throughout the entirety of the season, because they've been hit with so many injuries that once a lot of these players come back and all of these younger players continue to improve, I think they'll be in a smooth sailing opportunity point. And then, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, there's a very real chance that they add to this roster and with an impact forward if they are able to execute their vision before the end of the trade deadline.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Prior to the season, I said there was going to be five Atlantic Division teams that
I
make the
still think it.
playoffs, and I still think that 100%. So, while I don't know if I fully agree with your Leafs take, I think the biggest thing for me, and I'm not trying to relate it, I've been saying this to people, I'm not trying to relate it to the Blues 2019. I know other Leaf fans or other people around the Leafs are trying to do that. Just naturally, Craig Berube, head coach of that team, head coach of now this
Yeah, yeah,
team. But you know what I will say is that we have talked about injuries. I think if the Leafs can get to a healthy point, because Nyes has been injured,
it's
Austin
health.
Matthews has been injured, it's a massive part on the health side. You know what? The Boston Bruins on the top side, I know they've been missing a couple guys too. As you mentioned,
McAvoy, yeah.
David Pastrnak has had an electric start to the season, so that might cool off at some point. It's too early to say, but. I think the one team that a lot of people forget about is the Ottawa Senators because for me I don't believe the Panthers are going to miss. I don't care. Barkov or no Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk will come back at some point. I think they'll figure it out. So I think with the
Yeah.
Lightning in the equation, with the Panthers in the equation, I think Ottawa's going to make it based on what I've seen. I think there's a real shot that it's going to be a tight four team race between Detroit, Boston, Toronto, and Montreal for the final two wildcard spots. And it could come right
Yeah.
down into April. I'm not trying to give Ottawa like way too much hype because like that's not in my DNA here to just put a team that's had a couple of good games recently. I'm just more so
Yeah.
saying that I do think Ottawa actually has all the pieces in place for me at least. They had goaltending struggles at the start, but I think Allmark is capable of being a great goalie. So again, to me, the Atlantic can go in so many different directions. What we're talking about could change in a month because the gap we've talked about it on so many different shows. The Atlantic Division and the Eastern Conference in general. Like there's like
Mhm.
I don't have it in front of me right now, Marco. Maybe you do, but I think it's a 9 point gap right now, or in around there from the top to the bottom in the Eastern Conference. So, um,
8. Oh yeah, 9. I see it now. 9. 9.
yeah,
It's
it's crazy.
substantial.
It's insane. It's insane.
But
So
it makes sense from a point distribution perspective that it wouldn't be that wide. It's a little bit more insane, in fact, if you boogie on over to the Western Conference, where Colorado, at the moment of this recording, has 39 points in 23 games, and the Nashville Predators have 18 points. Right? So
yeah, there
like
you go.
there's a 21 point difference there. That's
Yeah,
that's nuts.
yeah, that
So
is nuts.
that's why I'm saying like the Eastern Conference is where parity lives. And I
Yes,
feel like if you look at the Western Conference, it's so lopsided.
for
You
sure.
could already identify at least four sellers in that market. And then there's the Winnipeg Jets and the Edmonton Oilers that are basically looking at themselves going, what's going on here? So
Yep.
with the injuries, and again, I really do think that injuries are the biggest problem hurting the Leafs right now. But I feel like because of that, of course, the benefit is they're not long-term injuries, which is great. A lot of them are
Yep.
back right now. Matthews is back, Nyes is back, which is great. You look at other teams that have long-term injuries, like the Bruins with McAvoy. That's a big deal, right? I know that Tampa's got a few long-term injuries. Washington lost Pierre-Luc Dubois for many months. That's their number two center. Like these injuries
Yep.
hurt. The New Jersey Devils still firing on all cylinders, mind you, but Jack Hughes and Dougie Hamilton injured or out of the lineup. Like it's not easy. So a lot of teams are contending with that right now, while a lot of other teams are floating around with no injury troubles yet.
Yep.
And I'm just worried about what happens when everybody comes back to normal. And so that is where I think the trade market will come into play because there are so many sellers, identifiable sellers right now in the Western Conference, and so much parity in the Eastern Conference. You see where I'm going to go with this, right?
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a more of a flux of talent going from the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference as we get closer to the trade deadline, and that may skew projections when it comes to what the NHL standings look like at the end of the season.
For sure. And that's the natural preference. You want to trade a guy outside your conference, not to see them much. But no, I definitely see that, Marco. I see that trend happening. And you know what? I'll just kind of reiterate, but also add to why I have that perspective on Toronto as an example, because I think for some Leaf fans, they forget this. Like so many years in a row now, it's been that comfortable spot in that division spot for
Yeah.
the most part, right? And it just hasn't worked out in the playoffs. So for somebody that, whether it's covering the team, being involved with the team, being a fan of the team, I want something different. So if it means hanging in around 4 or 5, 3 points out of a wild card spot, and you're really playing really tough hockey in the last 2 or 3 months of the season, I'm down for something different. It makes the guys desperate. I saw the Florida Panthers really turn it on last year in about February, and they were playing playoff style hockey right into the spring, where they were kind of going through the
Yeah.
motions, similar to the Edmonton Oilers last year, right? I mean, people forget the
Yep.
last 2 years, the Oilers have been horrendous in the standings from about
Terrible.
October to December. January, February rolls around and they really go on that run, and it ends up helping them propel them through the playoffs. So I'm not saying that's going to happen for sure with Toronto, and I'm not saying it's the easy way, but
It's possible.
the Stanley Cup is not an easy trophy to win. You always got to go through the hard ways to get there. So that's my perspective on that. Leading into the overall conversation, you kind of alluded to it. Western Conference teams maybe sending some players into the Eastern Conference. Just based on people you talk to, Marco, and maybe your overall sense. I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but you could just give me one. Is there a team or player that might come into the equation in terms of activity with the trades, or just a player that could come into the trade rumors? Is there something that you could maybe add to the show here for some fans that they might open their mouth, or just in terms of maybe being a bit surprised? Anything?
Well, I don't think it's surprising per se. With Vancouver, you talk about Kiefer Sherwood.
Yeah.
He's a guy that I know is going to be talk of the town, just being, having a career year and the physicality that he plays with and whatnot. That's a guy that I would definitely watch for. Blake Coleman in Calgary is definitely someone I would watch for. When they finally do decide that it's time to move it, there are a lot of teams that have kind of circled in around him and gone like, that could be a really interesting piece. Um, those are two guys that I've heard of late. Rasmus Anderson, we already know about. That's
Yeah.
a guy to keep an eye out on. But I wonder when it comes to, like we've talked about and we've heard about Quinn Hughes in Vancouver and what that would look like, and them needing an idea of what he's going to do. One guy I've always been curious about is Philip Hronik, because that's a
Wow.
guy
There we
signed to
go.
a sweetheart deal. That's a right shot defenseman that has just turned 28. Is he really going to want to stick around to rebuild? Because that's what it's going to be in Vancouver. If they do ever decide to trade Quinn Hughes, it's a rebuild. I'd be curious to see if he would waive, because I know that there are teams that feel like they're one top pair right shot defenseman away from contention. You look at a team, for example, like the Anaheim Ducks. That as a team that has all the young assets that you would need to make that kind of a trade. And that's the sole piece that they're missing in their lineup, is that top pair right shot defenseman. And we know that the Vancouver Canucks have interest in Pavel Mintyukov, for example. So, putting one and one together, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm just saying that Hronik, to me, if Vancouver decides to go that route, Hronik to me is a player that I think will generate a lot of interest if he's open to moving, because he does have a full no movement clause.
Yeah, I love that shout. I think it makes a lot of sense. You know what? I think the Anaheim Vancouver once like I think could make sense, even though it's in the Pacific Division, but as a one-off trade, I
Worked
think
out for
uh
Bieksa.
yeah, exactly. There you go. So I think it could make some sense. You kind of mentioned the names and also the team. If Tampa does do a full big swing here in terms of before the deadline, I don't know how it would work the cap. Maybe it's just one of them, but I mentioned on my stream the other day. I wouldn't be surprised if Tampa's looking at both Rasmus Anderson and a reunion with Blake Coleman. I think Blake Coleman could make a lot of sense there, depending. But you know what? Rasmus Anderson next to Victor Hedman also. I think all parties involved would be okay with that in terms of Rasmus Anderson and the Lightning. So you know what? I think there could be some big swings, really depending on, as you mentioned, the parity in the Eastern Conference. Does that kind
Mhm.
of evaporate a little bit? And also how active those Western Conference teams at the bottom are, because I think we do expect teams like Winnipeg and Edmonton to turn it around, especially Edmonton. But
Yeah.
obviously, there's time here until the trade deadline. So, no, Marco, really appreciate your time. If you could, we want to make sure everyone watching these clips, these episodes, go follow you. So I know there's a lot, but if you can give the main stuff a shout, where people can find you, where people can follow you, and where people can watch your shows.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could find me on any social platform, MN D'Amico. That's the easiest way to find me. If you have any questions, obviously, DMs are always open. I write for rg.org, RG Media, and you could hear me on BPM Sport if you understand French. That's always a possibility. Although we do have English interviews that we put out there because obviously not all the players speak French. You could definitely find me on multiple podcasts. I have my own, the Star and D'Amico show that's available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, you name it. So those are basically the footnotes of what I do on a regular basis. But you could basically just find me floating around anywhere on the internet nowadays.
Awesome. Marco, this is great. You're definitely great to talk to. I hope to have you back on. And like I said, if we do a group collab with the Dawn, maybe the Blackhawks will be pushing for a playoff spot as well. So it could be
Here's hoping.
yeah, there you go. It could be quite the exciting collab. So yeah, Marco, thanks for coming on. And yeah, I'm hoping even though it got super toxic, I'm hoping to see a Habs and Leafs series again in the playoffs soon. I think it's the best hockey. It's the best rivalry, or one of the best rivalries in my opinion. So
Yeah.
I think we hope to see it soon.
I think I would hope to see more than one Leafs Habs series in the next 50 years because one in the last 50 years is just not good enough.
No, agree. All right. Thanks, Marco.
My pleasure, man.